First of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone on behalf of CLFMA and myself. A warm welcome to Mrs. Alka Upadhyay ji, Secretary Animal Husbandry, Mr. Rajesh Kumar Singh ji, Secretary DPPIT, Mr. Tarun Sirdar ji, former Secretary Animal Husbandry, Balram Singh Yadav ji, our past chairman, and all my managing committee members, colleagues, and delegates. A warm welcome. Today's symposium is about 3 sessions, which my colleague Sandeep Singh ji will explain you in detail. And now I will hand over the mic to Sandeep, so he will be grateful. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to everyone in the room. Let's take a step back and reflect on what are we here to discuss today. We are in the Azadi Ka Amrit Kal, a celebration that we've all started on. But it's high time that we reflect upon the journey of this nation as an agri-economy. There were times when there were famine in this country. There were times that we were dependent on developed world for import of wheat. From that to today, where if we decide not to export rice in the market, we start moving the global prices. 24% of global rice demand is being met by India. So our decision to import or export starts moving the global market. We are the largest, now one of the largest shrimp exporters in the country. 15 years back, it was a completely different story. We were a marginal player. We produce the largest quantum of milk in the world today. As far as poultry, eggs, meat is concerned, possibly recognized easily as in the top 10 countries of the world. This defines our present, which basically means we are reasonably self-sufficient to meet our requirement or nation's requirement. The challenge or the point of discussion today is to see how can we take this to the next level, where we become supplier to the world, and as mentioned yesterday in one of the discussions, at least supplier to our neighboring countries. This has to be done in the context of the global challenges that we face. In last 3-4 years, we've seen global supply chains and commodity supply chains to be broken, repaired many times over. We've seen spikes of inflation in commodities. Climate change is a reality, which will also introduce a sets of challenge in and around how the prices of some of these commodities move. Livestock sector being what it is, will end up consuming some of these materials to produce the value-added product, which means the construct for us from here onwards would be around 2 points. Self-sufficient for the nation, how can we be the provider for the world? At the same time, how do we navigate the challenges that possibly somewhat policy and somewhat climate will keep on throwing at us? So these are the 2 things that we need to keep in mind when we start our discussions today. Yesterday, Minister Rupala ji made a very important point, which was around the fact that since 1947 to 2014, only 3,700 crore was provided to the Fisheries Department, which has become 20,000 crore today, in subsequent to 2014. There is a dedicated ministry for this sector now, which also means the spotlight is on us. It is for the people in this room to decide and discuss and solve for what is needed to be done in the next 10-15 years in this sector to ensure that we shine and deliver to the promise of potential that we are demonstrating for a while. So the 3 sessions today that we have chosen are curating these thought processes. The first one is about becoming globally competitive in a market which will remain challenging, and how do we navigate the same. The second one is around demand and supply, which will start solving for the challenges and our linkages and interlinkages with the global agri-commodity market. And the third one, which is interesting one, is around policy and regulations. So if we were to become an exporter and a livestock provider to the world, how do we handle this with policies which will help the industry grow and flourish in future? With this, I would request the panelists of the first session to please come onto stage. My boss, Mr. Balram Singh Yadav, Srimati Alka Upadhyay, Shri Rajesh Kumar Singh, and Shri Tarun Sridhar. I'd also request Abhay to come on stage and felicitate Mr. Yadav. I'll just give a snapshot on what Mr. Yadav is all about. I'm sure most of the people in the room know, but for people who've come for the first time, he is the managing director of Godrej Agrovet Limited, one of the foremost diversified agribusiness companies. He also serves as managing director of Godrej Tyson Foods, besides being a director in numerous companies, which is ACI Godrej, Creamline Dairy Products, and Aztec Life Sciences. He has been the chairman of CLFMA of India twice, and he began his career with Godrej in 1990, and over the years, he has handled the roles of increasing responsibility across businesses and regions in the company. A raconteur par excellence, Balram inspires his team with incredible stories from his rich experience in the field, only when he's not driving them to deliver their best. He's also an active angel investor, mentoring a slew of next-generation entrepreneurs. That's BSY for you, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'd request Mr. Sumit Sureka to come to the stage and introduce Srimati Alka Upadhyay.
Srimati Alka Upadhyay, an Indian Administrative Service Officer from the Madhya Pradesh 1990 cadre, was appointed as Secretary, Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairy on 24th April 2023. Prior to this, she was Secretary, Ministry of Road and Transport and Highways, Government of India. Mrs. Upadhyay has served in various positions in the Government of Madhya Pradesh and Government of India. She has been involved in policy making and decisions in various sectors like personnel, finance, health and rural development. Srimati Upadhyay has done her MSc in Organic Chemistry, MA in Economics and Masters in Public Administration. I would like to invite now Mr. Divya Gulati to come please felicitate her. I would like to invite Mr. Naveen Pashuparthi to come and introduce Sri Rajesh Singh and Sri Tarun Sikdar.
Morning to everybody out here. Brief on Sri Rajesh Kumar Singh. Rajesh Kumar Singh is an IAS service officer from 1989 batch, Kerala Kader. He has assumed the charge of Secretary, Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industries on 24th April 2023. Prior to this, he was serving as Secretary, Department of Animal Husbandry, Dairy, Ministry of Fisheries and Animal Husbandry and Dairy. He has held many important positions in the Union Government as Commissioner, DDA, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Joint Secretary, Department of Agriculture, Cooperation and Farmers Welfare, and Chief Vigilance Officer, FCI, which is Food Corporation of India. He has also held important positions in the state government as Secretary, Urban Development, and lately as Finance Secretary, Government of Kerala. I invite Neeraj Kumar Srivatsav to honor, bouquet, and appreciate the presence of Sri Rajesh Kumar Singh in CLFMA. Thank you, Neeraj. I've been requested to read and introduce Mr. Tarun Sridhar. And this morning, I got this brief, which is a 6-page brief. And I went to him and said, sir, kaise, ye to 12 minutes lagta hai sab, and the speed at which it will go to 15 minutes. So I said, sir, I'll introduce you the way I'm comfortable. If you get offended, we will settle the issues outside. So Mr. Tarun Sridhar needs no introduction, absolutely no introduction. All I could say for CLFMA, he's been a well-wisher, he's been an excellent facilitator for Government of India in his service. He's built a revenue stream for CLFMA, appreciated the efforts of CLFMA, guided a CLFMA, mentored CLFMA, and happy to have him with CLFMA. So I request Mr. Nisar Mohammed to come and appreciate the presence of Mr. Tarun Sridhar with all of us today. Thank you, Nisar. I now hand over the session 1 to the moderator. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm very honored and glad to moderate this session, and I hope that I'll be able to do a good job considering the time constraint and the wealth of information our speakers have. So in addition to what Sandeep Singh said, I must say that I think people like me have run out of presentation material in last several years because of several policy initiatives and capital formation incentive initiatives, if I have correctly coined the whole thing, done by this ministry after its formation. In fact, we have never seen such support, both in policy as well as incentives, to do something. So I think the ball is in our court. And I must say that we are through the first phase of this industry. I am sure that everybody can see that we are now almost on auto mode in terms of growth, in terms of efficiency improvement, automation, and we know how to manage it. The only thing is that animal agriculture throughout the world is very volatile. There are patches of oversupply, patches of undersupply. Problem is not scalability of this industry. Problem is now sustainability. And I think from this forum today, we will start talking about animal agriculture 2.0 when we spread our wings beyond domestic into the global arena. I think one of the most important thing with my more than 3 decades experience in this sector is that big problem is that sometimes we make money, sometimes we don't make money. And these patches of overproduction has to be taken care of by export markets or developing neighboring countries which can consume some of our surpluses at some time. But of course, we cannot call them surplus because they have to be proper initiatives where we have to compete with global giants. I must also say that in spite of the fact that we have such a vibrant exports happening from this country, animal agriculture forms only a minuscule part of it. Total agri exports was about $53 billion in 2023, and animal agriculture was about 12 billion, so there is a great opportunity. So I think today we will deliberate and probably get some insights on how we should take this forward. So my first question is to Madam. I must say that I will be failing in my duty if I do not compliment and ask her to talk about various schemes which have been floated by the ministry and their impact, their utilization, and the kind of growth in capital formation they are seeing. Because as Mr. Honorable Ex-Secretary said, that the whole thing has been focused on incentives to invest. Madam, would you like to update on that? Yeah.
Before I start on the subject, I think a big thanks and from the industry and from me goes to my predecessors, Mr. Sridhar, Mr. Singh sitting over here for putting those policies in place. You know, there has been a paradigm shift from seeing animal husbandry, livestock as a poverty elimination program to now capital formation. The thought itself, I think, has traversed a long path. Today, we are not talking about subsidies for 1 or 2 animals. We are talking about giving incentives to the private sector. Also, I would be failing if I do not draw the example of some of our success stories outside of this sector, for example, the pharma sector or the IT sector, where the entire growth story was written by the private entrepreneurs. To get the private entrepreneur into the room itself, I think, is a great leap of faith on the industry. And today, while the budget of the animal husbandry or the fisheries department remains not too big, it's still very small. But whatever we get in terms of even our gross budgetary support, we are unable to spend because the capacity to absorb is also very less. Now, moving from all that to capital formation or to incentivize the private industry, the brilliant stroke of Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund, and also I must mention the PM Sampada Yojana, together put the outlay is about 35,000 crores in the sector. We all know the person who's initiated this session today was mentioning that we are the largest exporter of shrimps today. We are the largest producer of dairy today. But here, of course, there is a problem we haven't been able to put our house in order. So the allegation or the unrest probably in the room here is very true, because as a department, as the convener for the state's animal husbandry departments, I think that a lot more needs to be done. Primarily, we do not have the good phytosanitary practices. Primarily, we do not have a good animal health environment. And a lot of work has taken place and is being done. And I'm sure very shortly we will be able to overcome these issues. Now, once these issues, in house issues, are tackled at the government level, the appetite of the private industry, which we have seen through the Animal Infrastructure Development Fund. So that itself shows that there is a lot of enthusiasm, and I'm sure private sector is not going to put in their money in a sinking ship. They would always put their money in something which is going to remain buoyant, and this sector has shown a lot of buoyancy. Very happy to share with you over here. I'm not getting into the figures, but very happy to share with you. So the takers on the Animal Infrastructure Development Fund have been from rupees 5 lakhs to rupees 700 crores. The scheme is so beautifully designed, and in fact, I was very pleasantly shocked. We are posing this scheme for extension before the cabinet, and the interest subvention has no limit. Normally, in other ministries, other schemes, there have been limits कि 5 crore तक का ही interest subvention देंगे, but here it is open-ended. Projects worth 700 crores, 400 crores, 200 crores, 300 crores have been sanctioned by the bank, and we are giving interest subvention to them. Now, there have been so many takers. Most of the big houses who are in this sector have taken loan from us. I was trying to do a check, and suspicious as we policymakers are, I wanted to do a kind of desk verification or ground verification, and I found wherever the money has been given, the banks have given loans to the private sector. All of them are in good shape. The infrastructure has come in place. They have started operationalizing it. So I think there is a lot of push over there. I have a couple of things to mention over here when we talk about the private sector. Along with this, we will have to also think about the cooperative growth. We will also have to think about the Section 8 companies, the FPOs, etc., and for which enabling environment is very important, which as government we are doing. But I think there is a great scope for a hub and spoke model. While the private sector opens up their capital resources for this sector, unless until we tap in the area around the catchment area or the watershed area, as you say, I don't think you would be successful. So it is a gainful situation for everybody. I was just speaking to somebody from Andhra Pradesh, and it was a very interesting thing. Feed and fodder. This is something which is of a lot of concern to us at this point in time. We have seen an inflation of about 62% in this sector itself, and truly so, it is a cause of worry. And in the G20 side event that we had in Anand, I was speaking to several other countries' representatives, and they say that the same problem exists for them as well. But when I was speaking to this entrepreneur in Andhra Pradesh, he said, I put up a small silage plant, 3 to 4 crores of investment. And what I have been able to do is convince the farmers around the villages, and they are like contract farmers, to grow fodder as a commercial crop. They have done that. And he says about 120 hectares of land has been covered now. So if this hub and spoke model is something that we can build upon, I think in several areas where the investments are coming, we will be able to see a very positive growth. It's not too far that we will be opening our doors for exports as well. In fact, table eggs, there was a problem in export of table eggs. We've been able to make some headway. Sri Lanka, Malaysia, etc. We've been able to sell some of our eggs. So was the secretary at that point in time. We want to harness such situation. So I think all of this together, duck meat, I'll just take one example. Now currently FTAs are being signed and discussed. There is a lot of heated discussion while dairy has remained as a sector we do not touch upon in any of the FTAs, there was a discussion, a very hot discussion on duck meat. Interestingly, uh, the when we found out in the US, duck meat industry is owned by just a couple of families, just a couple of families, but the production is so huge that they are restless to get into the Indian market. So here also, there will always be this balancing act between small farmers, marginal farmers, and the bigger industries to step up their productions. But I think the time has come that we will have to look at more of infrastructure development. Some infrastructure development is also happening through the national dairy development plans, NPD as we say, and the cooperative sector has benefited a lot from it, from milk procurement to milk processing industries are being setups are being taken care of.
Thank you very much. I think again you've solved a problem before we asked for it, because we would have asked for extension of the scheme. So thank you very much. I must also appreciate that ease of access is simply amazing for this scheme. So I also need to inform the audience here is that number of entrepreneurs who are getting created in silage is simply amazing. This is just happening under the radar. They don't come from our industry. They are young engineers. And we know several companies in North India who have reached 100,000 tons of silage per annum. Having said that, sir, I think my next question goes to Mr. Singh. Sir, APIDA has done such a wonderful job, $53 billion worth of exports last year, only about 12 billion from animal agri sector, and most of it is shrimp. Are there some things which we are not getting right in rest of the animal agriculture, or are there some learnings or valuable insights you can give us so we can also become part of that growth story?
I'm very happy to be here, and it shows the dynamism and the attractiveness of the sector in a way that two former secretaries are happy to come and join this. Both are formers, though. The reason is that I guess we feel connected to the sector in many ways because of its impact on the rural population of the country, among farmers, and perhaps there's also a cultural connect with the livestock sector. So, as I said, I'm very happy to join this discussion today. Before I talk about the success of APIDA and whether we can replicate some successful examples from other sectors onto this, I think we shouldn't sell ourselves too short. If you see agriculture, our agriculture exports and imports as a percentage of world agricultural trade, that is actually higher than our percentage in most other commodities. It's even lower in many of the other commodities. For example, electronics, we just started becoming an exporter, mainly because of the success of Apple. But that percentage I would guarantee is still lower than for agriculture exports. But it's still very low. I think our share in global agriculture trade is about 2%, right? In other sectors, it's combined, it's about 1.5%. So it's even lower. So actually, we've done pretty well, and that is reflected in the fact that our CAGR is higher, the livestock industry in particular, as compared to the rest of agriculture. And it is comparable in a way to the manufacturing and the secondary sector. In fact, comparable to the services sector, not the manufacturing. Manufacturing sector is also sort of stuck in a 2 to 3% kind of a growth rate, and in general terms. The livestock sector is the one sector which has shown higher growth rates than these other, other two sectors of the economy, particularly the general agriculture. But the initiatives that have worked so far, which are very clearly working, our PLI schemes are working at least in some sectors. In the area of electronics and large-scale electronics and mobiles, it is clearly working. In the area of pharma and to a lesser extent in the area of food processing, where again we have a large PLI scheme targeting some 10,000 odd crores of investment and about 2,500 crores of incentives. That again has picked up very well. It has spread all over the country. I'm not sure what is the percentage of livestock and dairy industry in that, but I'm sure there would be at least some industries which have taken advantage of that scheme. The success of PLI has actually generated a lot of calls from other subsectors of a different industry to also seek a PLI scheme. I think I remember reading that our industry does have a cost disability, which is basically the reason for asking for a PLI in a particular scheme. As of now, new PLIs would be difficult to negotiate, but the way I see it, one should take advantage of the fact that we have a good PLI in food processing, which is perhaps still on, and the PM Sampada Yojana, which has a fairly large subsidy of, I think it's up to 35% subsidy, which is much higher than most other government schemes. Those areas will work. As Alka ji was mentioning earlier, the problem with our ability to get a higher level of exports is primarily linked to quality, to productivity, and our sanitary standards, and the fact that the prevalence of FMD is a convenient excuse in many ways for many developed nations to deny us access. If we are able to create FMD-free zones, we could negotiate our way out of, to some excess in some of these countries. In poultry, we've had recently a lot of success, as was being mentioned, because they had a problem. They had a supply shock due to avian influenza, in both in the US and Europe, as well as in some of the Southeast Asian countries. And they had no option but to turn to India, and we were able to sort of cut some corners and actually, get the exports done. So, as was being mentioned, there are supply disruptions which happen. Agriculture and commodity exports in general tend to go up and down. But this is a sector where, if you see the overall growth potential of this sector, the indication is that India will be having almost a third of the world's middle class will be coming out of India in the next 10 years. We already have the world's youngest, or one of the youngest population. Our median age of this is 28.2. The government, the national government under Prime Minister Modi, is investing heavily in infrastructure, both physical and digital, both of which are helping to formalize the economy. And I wanted to mention formalize the economy because there are large elements of our livestock sector which need to be formalized, other than poultry, which is significantly under the corporate sector, which is formalized. The meat industry is highly disaggregated and local. Dairy, contrary to popular opinion, is also not hugely formalized. It is still largely local, and it is except the organized cooperative sector, and that too is regionally scattered. It is good in some parts of the country, and again, that is an area where the Modi government has recently taken the initiative of trying to kickstart dairy cooperatives in the other areas of the country where dairy cooperatives still don't exist or have not had much traction. So these are the kind of initiatives, hopefully, which will transition this industry into a more organized, more formal, and even more, it's already very dynamic, it is already growing very well, but it will become even more prosperous, and hopefully we'll be producing enough so that we start exporting once we take care of our quality and sanitary issues. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll turn to Mr. Tarun Sridhar. The best part of his being with us for last 6-7 years is that he has observed us from all sides, and now he's closely associated with the industry also. So I think you must have seen the success of aqua exports from this country. Last year it was 63,000 crores, and the kind of push which is there, I am very sure it will be more than 1 lakh of crores in 2-3 years. One thing I must also tell you, that there is a positive rub-off on two things. One is overall quality standards in terms of management and production have improved dramatically because of export orientation. The second thing is that it has brought stability to domestic prices by getting rid of these surpluses and shortages during different times of the year, and which has helped farmer make more money. From your perspective, now you know us very well, you know the farmers also very well, you know the dynamics also very well. What would you say about different stakeholders, what they should do to probably come up to the level of shrimp in animal agriculture, particularly poultry and milk and other areas, or the piggery, etc.?
Thank you, Mr. Yadav. And I think after Mrs. Upadhyay and Mr. Rajesh Kumar Singh have spoken, they've at least addressed the core issue. I also made a passing reference yesterday in the evening session in terms of the whole focus from direct infusion of subsidies to investment and creating, and that is what Mrs. Upadhyay explained. And let me compliment her on success in extending the Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund. And when initially the scheme was drafted, it was a hard time convincing the finance ministry to even agree to take it to the cabinet. So I think congratulations to all of you on that. Now, Mr. Singh has mentioned in terms of certain sectors getting formalized and introducing the concepts of corporate management of them. Poultry is integrated, shrimp is another one. There we stop. You see, I would be slightly wary of just trying to replicate the entire shrimp model. Shrimp is a highly traded commodity globally. Dairy is not a highly traded commodity. Only some of the value-added products of dairy are. Poultry, eggs is not a highly traded commodity. Egg in some kind of a powdered form, liquid form, etc. is traded. So let us not be too obsessed with trying to capture the export markets. When I say globally competitive does not merely mean capturing a large share of the export market. It means that your product is in great demand. Now today, just to give the other side of the shrimp story, we may have emerged as the biggest shrimp exporter in the world in a very short period. But we have also been dethroned from that top position in a very short period by a country as small as Ecuador. That is one. Second is today, our shrimp is sold primarily in the US and some European countries as a cheap shrimp, not as a premium and a high quality shrimp. Now, why I'm saying particularly is that we are carrying a historical baggage of always evaluating our performance in terms of numbers and quantity. Today, when you say describe the dairy sector, we say we are the biggest milk producer of the world, we produce this much. Describe the aquaculture fishery sector, we always talk in terms of the tons or the liters or what we produce. We never talk in terms of the value and the quality we produce. So first thing is the industry has to now change its mindset. Not industry when I say, well, I would say all the stakeholders, government, NGOs, industry, everyone who's involved in the entire production value chain, start talking in terms of value, not in terms of quantity. The historical reason for quantity is since independence, for the first 3-4 decades of independence, we were grappling with shortages in all sectors. Now that is past. We are much ahead of that. That is why we have to change our entire orientation. When we talk of livestock sector, let us call it as a food production sector. Once we call it as a food production system, sector, we'll start thinking in terms of how the manufacturing sector evaluates its performance in terms of its balance sheet. Why can't you have a balance sheet of the cow every day? After all, cow, if you view it as an economic asset, so if your cow is giving you 3 liters of milk and it is fetching farmer 90 rupees or 100 rupees, so he's ending up spending more than that. So then you'll start thinking in terms of productivity, what Mr. Singh also mentioned. See, productivity is the overarching issue as far as the livestock fisheries sector is concerned. Per unit effort of a fisherman on aquaculture in India gives 4.5 kgs of fish. In Norway, it gives 250 kgs of fish. So this is the huge gap. So I am very fond of many people would have heard me say it before. When I'm asked to just in one sentence describe the livestock and fishery sector in the country, I say it is like the opening lines of Charles Dickens' novel A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of the worlds, it was the worst of the world, it was a spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. So we are the biggest in terms of quantity, absolute numbers. We are the smallest when it comes to productivity. We are the richest if you talk the absolute value, but we are the poorest when you talk in terms of per unit value. So this is something which you have to guard against. Another thing, the demographic data which Mr. Singh gave, we are not only, I don't know whether we become the most populous or there's still a debate going on whether we are number 2 or number 1. Okay, probably we are the most populous, but we are also the biggest market in the world. And with the middle class figures he was giving, so I think it's very essential for this sector to remain highly competitive is to develop very strong and robust domestic market and domestic supply chain. I have been, well, banging my head against the wall when I talk to the shrimp industry people, etc. When your shrimp can reach from the port of Vizag to New York, why can't it reach Delhi? Why can't it reach Delhi? All of you can Google right now, and I place a challenge that the price, retail price of shrimp in the market in Delhi would be 4 times higher than what it is in the market in New York. But somehow we have lost out on this. So we need to reinvent our institutions like MPDA and APIDA also, rather like Mr. Singh. Now it's called internal trade. So those agencies also, right from only export development, should be the trade development in these things, and this orientation has to change. Lastly, I'll stop here. Another challenge which you have to face is the losses. We are 1/3 losses of our absolute production is a waste and loss. Now, waste is not such a huge phenomena in India as it is in the Western world, but losses is something which you can ill afford. Now, again, losses, I'm not talking in terms of the moralistic angle that people are going hungry and the food is getting lost, although that angle is also very strong. Damn it, you are losing money. You are losing money, and you have invested in creating that wealth, and that is what you are losing. This is another area which needs to be addressed. But lastly, I'll say overarching is productivity and quality. Mr. Singh also mentioned, Mrs. Upadhyay also mentioned, you will not be able to compete globally unless you address this issue of quality. One more point which is slightly dear to me, Mr. Yadav, if you permit, and I mentioned, industry has to be a bit more aggressive and take pride in the fact that you are in the livestock industry. Abhi Diwali aayegi. Many of you would have gift hampers in which you will have imported chocolates, imported drinks, some imported pies, everything there. Diwali, all these festivals, these festivals are associated with exchange and offer of traditional Indian sweets. The huge variety of the sweets available in India can be matched by no one. And in terms of sweet, you'll put a box of baklava. You'll put baklava. And many of you will do it who are involved with the livestock industry. Why can't we be aggressive and position our sweets as a healthier and a tastier alternative to chocolates and pies and things like that, which are in the... You have chena-based sweets, you have khoya-based sweets, you have shrikhand, you have kulfi, you have 10 kinds of barfi, gulab jamun, etc. And now technology is available. The huge machines which are making tofu and selling it at exorbitant prices can surely make paneer. They can surely make paneer also. All these which are making chocolates can make barfi, gulab jamun, etc. This is another area you have to move beyond just raw milk. 215 million tons of milk, but most of it going as raw milk. Your per capita supply availability is much higher. Why can't it be processed into, and then maybe look at global markets and other things? Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. One thing which we are not guilty of is that we acquired a dairy business in South India, and now our gift hampers have ghee and other things. So we had made sure, yeah, but I am very glad to supply to all these companies if they want. The second thing, actually, you said it, in fact, some of the places where we have done well, we are also a story of complacency, particularly in shrimp. I think I studied Thailand very closely during the early years of this millennium, when we were stuck with bird flu year after year. In 3 years, Thai industry transformed from exporters of raw chicken to exporter of cooked products. And the government and Thailand industry worked very closely. And in one of the symposium, their head of the poultry industry said that we pray that Brazil should never have bird flu, because we don't want world to come to us for raw chicken again. So I think this is the value addition story. Ma'am, I'll come back to you. I'll have 2 questions in the interest of time. One is, I think milk is one area where probably I think private, public, government can work and probably open up, because my sense is that the glut years have again started after 2 shortage years. And we will have a lot of milk and a lot of problems along with low prices of milk. The second thing which bothers this forum a lot is feed and fodder initiatives with productivity of soya and corn not jumping to the same level as the global standards. So what is our plan to give a little bit of boost to this productivity, and so that we don't have to import any of these products in future?
The second point first, because that leads to ultimately the first point. And one area which I have taken upon myself as a challenge is this feed and fodder business. And the probable shortage, the probable mismatch in whatever is given as feed to the cattle, etc., etc. This is something which will need very high focus. We have, for one, it's very interesting. Fodder, because it relates to the cattle, as a business allocation principle is with Animal Husbandry and Dairy Department. Whereas the farmer who understands farming is with the Agriculture Ministry. The fodder seed in terms of allocation of business is with the Agriculture Ministry, and yet we are expected to be self-sufficient in fodder as our own mandate in the department. Various efforts have been made. Various trials have been done. There used to be a subsidy system which has been done away with. There was a talk of, sir, if I'm not mistaken, a fodder mission at some point in time, but that fodder mission also could not take off because there was a bit of non-seriousness, I guess, on this topic at the policy level. Now it has entered again into the drawing room and it has become a very important focal point. Between February to June this year, we were seized with high inflation in milk prices, and that kind of rattled the government. And we then were able to show the picture to the government and say that the real problem lies in this sector. In one of our schemes, the National Livelihood Mission scheme, which is being restructured, we have in fact, the Finance Ministry has agreed to bring this again as a part of the scheme. And we look forward to having more entrepreneurs in this area. We also look at combining the efforts of the forest, the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Agriculture Department. In fact, one of the entries that have made into the National Livelihood Mission is, Livestock Mission, sorry, is cultivating wastelands or the forest lands, because gochar land we all know is scarce, but degraded forest, where there is no forest, where there is no entry for anything, we've been able to convince the government and get this as part of the scheme. So I think several efforts from several directions will only yield results. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the hub and spoke model is something where entrepreneurs bring in their technology, where they bring in the market. I think that will give enough confidence to the farmers. So that is on the fodder side. Now on the dairy side, I think a lot has already been spoken. We've had a fantastic run, 6% year-on-year growth in the sector. And in fact, in the year 2022, there was also a condition where we were able to export some of our skimmed milk to some of the countries abroad. But this year, as sir has said, we are again in a situation where there may be a glut period. The seasonality, in fact, is one of the most, I would say, the bane for this industry. And sir ne wahi baat, I think, kahi ki let's not be very gung-ho about it. Look at it as a food system rather than just as an enterprise. I think that's a very important lesson for us. Going by statistics, the milk is the largest crop in India, and it amounts to about 8 lakh crores. Now, I totally agree and resonate the view that Mr. Sridhar has said. We must look at the domestic industry because I think aap log zyada aware hai. I am very new entrant into this sector and I've had no exposure to this sector earlier. The international prices are not favorable for us at this point in time. In fact, markets outside are pressing hard on our doors and knocking our doors very, very hard to allow entry. Government has been very, very supportive and not letting that industry, those products come in the FTA. Having said that, even though we have been able to have a very good growth, the farmers have also faced the music in the glut season. And this year, Maharashtra, for example, started facing the glut in the month of June itself because of the changed rain pattern, or in the month of July, if I'm not mistaken, June and July. And then the government stepped in and they kind of fixed a minimum support price. Then also there were a lot of people who started crying horse ki ye kya minimum support price milk mein kab se aa gaya hai. Well, it was not a minimum support price, but kind of trying to ring fence. Several policies of the government, while trying to keep the retail prices in check, have not been very favorable for the farmers. So all of this put together, I think there is a need to develop the Indian market. There is a need to invest more in food processing industries. I have figures with me which talks about the projected export for targets, and this is on the basis of the figures given to us by the industry. The short term for the year 23-24, currently we're exporting about 2600 crores. We hope to reach to 2860 in this current year. 5,200 crores as far as the short term, the midterm target is concerned, and then by 2047, which is what we all envisioned in our vision documents, about 28,600 crores. So all of these efforts are there, but I think rather than be absolutely gung-ho about or focusing all our energies and channelizing all our efforts towards exports, the local market will provide us with a lot of support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay on this subject because, and I'll push my luck a little, because something which bothers all of us is corn and soya production in this country. I'm saying that one of the quick fixes in this area is to scientifically test GM and bring it in. Suddenly there'll be a improvement in yield, production as well as productivity, and that takes care of a back of the envelope numbers will take care of about next 10 to 15 years of the requirement of industry, food as well as starch industry as far as corn is concerned. Is there any plan between these two ministries to evaluate this and try and introduce? Because anecdotal data says that it was Mr. Rupala and Mr. Modi ji who were in Gujarat when GM cotton came. I think the same team is here. So is there a chance something like this likely to happen?
What to say? And I think this was a subject which was dwelled somewhere around 2016-18, sir, if you remember. But I have another reason, and why I say this over here, another factor to be very worried about. So in my earlier ministry, in the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, we were talking about ethanol, blended fuel. We were talking about ethanol. And a large part of our corn is now being diverted towards fuel industry. So one, we are short. Two, the greener pastures, that side, I think that is also a cause of worry. And on this context, I think very soon, government as a whole approach will need to be taken as to how much are we promoting ethanol at the cost of fodder availability in the country. That will also have to be brought on the drawing board. But I was told by someone who has a lot of experience in innovation, etc., and they mentioned that this DDGS, from as a remnant of all of this processing will also be available. But I think we are not really thinking in those terms as to the government as a whole on promotion of ethanol. Either we go for a very lock, stock, barrel approach to promote corn, or we have to take a very balanced view. So I think many of you who are sitting in this room should also form a voice on this. So that's a problem that I pose before you.
So I am an advocate of GM, and in several fora I have been very embarrassed by the NGOs several times, and you know the people I am talking about. I must also just tell you one more story which will make you interesting. I was invited by one of the banks. They have a program called Leading Ladies, where they just to attract wealth of their husbands, they take ladies through some kind of orientation, and I was supposed to speak on agri. And the question came from one of them was about GM crop. And I asked only one question, then how many of your children are staying in US or working in US? Almost 90% of the ladies raised their hands. And I said they're having GM food every day. So I think, yeah. Coming to you now, two questions. One is, I think time and again we have said that poultry is a low-hanging fruit as far as opportunity to export is concerned. I'll stay with that because I strongly feel I've seen this industry more than 30 years, that just to make a vibrant domestic sector, we need an outlet. And when export starts, the standards go up in domestic also. And value addition, hygiene standards, traceability, because we can't do it for export and not do it for domestic industry. So we have been saying that in case, because our efficiencies are very good and I can vouch for it because we are partners to Tyson Foods. Godrej Tyson Foods is a company which I am MD of also. And our standards of efficiency, whether it is FCR, hatchability, processing yield, etc., matches the best. But we are still not able to compete, primarily because of cost of production, because corn soya is very cheap in Brazil and US. And the second thing I would say that just to address this issue and to get things going, is there a possibility of MPDA kind of organization in a small setup be set up for poultry? And I must tell you that we are just itching to go because there is so much of capital formation happening in all sectors. And ma'am is a witness to that because several of our initiatives in that infrastructure fund have gone to poultry. I think we're just waiting. It is a revolution waiting to happen. Can the government facilitate it?
To be very frank, I don't think the government has the appetite for a fresh promotional agency. On the contrary, if you see some of the other commodities, the tobacco and the rubber boards, etc., the trend is towards rationalizing and closing them down. The easier move would be to, APIDA, besides other agriculture products, does take care of buffalo meat exports as well, and it is a success story. It may be easier to bring poultry, meat and exports also, and egg exports under them, particularly because the Export Inspection Council, which handles the egg exports in particular, has not been able to facilitate their exports to the extent that it is required. Bringing it under APIDA would be good. At a broader level, in terms of the quality standards, etc., the government's thinking now is that we'll have two sets of standards. For the non-food items, we'll have only BIS. And for all types of food, including livestock sector products, so the idea is that it will all come under FSSAI. Now, and we get rid of all these other, parallel mechanisms, AgMark, and all these other things that are going on. The only problem with that is that FSSAI, of course, sets out minimum norms, which are essentially for, certifying for human consumption. Those minimum norms may not always be sufficient for exports. So we'll probably have to put some higher standards for exports to meet the global requirements. And one way of doing it would be to perhaps create, if not, at least some other aspirational standard or a graded set of standards through FSSAI to facilitate exports. That would be the way to go. And similarly, when it comes to APIDA, as I see it, we'll probably have to look at APIDA as the option. Fresh institutions are unlikely to be sort of looked on with favor by government.
So, because we were talking about poultry and I had just joined and there was this, I had the occasion to be attending the OHA conference in Paris. And one of the things that came up from the industry, several countries, was that we do not have these disease-free compartments. Surprisingly, there were only two. So one of the efforts that we are making, and hopefully with fingers crossed, we have now applied for 28 such compartments. We have posted with OHA, we are in correspondence, and I have a feeling we should be able to make a breakthrough over there. Once these numbers also rise, and besides other things that are happening, I think that will also facilitate our trade.
So that is one more question answered before it is asked. So it was there, that zoning of. But I'll stay with Singh sir, and I just want to say that one thing which makes us insecure most of the time is the threat which may become a reality in future is import of chicken. And I say, in all fairness, we don't mind importing chicken if you also allow us to import cheaper corn and soya meal from outside. And I think that one way is that we already have a foot in the door. You allowed almost 1 million tons of GM soya meal come in. So what is it that which is stopping us now to create a level playing field?
So, if you ask for my personal opinion, I totally agree. I don't see any reason why we should not allow GM corn in India, particularly since in different contexts we batted for GM soya meal imports at one stage, and the whole of government did agree to that. There's no reason why it can't be agreed for other areas as well, but except for the fact that we have a very strong set of environmental activists in this country who are also very litigant. And it is that fear of litigation that which is preventing fairly simple. I mean, we've had a recent example of some, I think, alpha trying to be brought in, where our department, which was my previous department as well, supported it, but agriculture, which is supposedly not looking after this subject, is worried about clearing those shipments. So personally, I see no reason. I think, but we have to convince all arms of the government to get it started. The other question that you had was about what was the other part? Yeah, so I mean, I think that you can rest assured that your department will fight tooth and nail and prevent market access, except in very niche areas like pork or in duck and things like that, where we really don't have much production. In other areas, I'm sure the department has been quite strong in defending it. There is a lot of pressure, particularly from the Commerce Ministry these days in the context of the new FTAs that we are trying with EU and UK. But so far, we've ensured that dairy is an absolute red line. And in the meat products also, in general, we are very, very conservative, except in very niche products like perhaps some specialty pork and specialty cheeses and those kind of things. So I don't think you need to worry on that score.
I must add one thing, sir, that these niches, high-value products also give us an opportunity to import substitute, because plenty of times I have seen, including we had a retail chain, high-end retail chain at one time, that initially we would get those products from outside at cost X, and suddenly our entrepreneurs will start making it at 0.5X, and that import substitution will happen. In some way, opening door for that is also opening way for us. I think I'll be failing in my duty if I don't allow the audience to ask questions, because they are very eager. Plenty of times these people have said that you take so much of time yourself. So I think you can ask the question.
One thing on GM,
Yes.
I just want to add. I think Mr. Singh actually explained in the correct perspective the issue with respect to GM. So just one word of advice to the industry. The opponents of GM, the environmentalists, and not only are they litigant, they are very vocal. The votaries of GM are silent. As you mentioned, when I was also part of certain discussions, there's a general consensus in the government that we should be allowing and promoting the GM products, GM crops. However, it's an issue of whether there is a political risk involved and whether it is worth taking that risk. Why? Because government hears only the voices of the opponents of GM and not voices of the votaries of GM supported by scientific data and evidence. That is what you need to do. Believe me, in the highest echelons of government, there is a by and large consensus that we have to take a call on this.
Sir, your advice on both these days have been well taken. We are reasonably embarrassed by what you have said. So I think we will make sure that we create adequate database, knowledge, and speakers to counter these narratives at all places. We'll do that. Questions? Yes. Naveen. Just your name, what business are you in, or what is your question? Only question. Huh?
Sir, I'm from Bangalore. We're into We are into meat retailing under a brand called Nandu's. Of late, we are getting a lot of information that a free trade agreement has been signed between India and Australia, under which the import of mutton and lamb comes under zero import duty. Can you just throw some light, please? We're a bit confused on that. What's happening? If you can educate us.
I'm not aware of this particular news. I don't think it has any basis. India, Australia, we don't have a full FTA as yet with them. So you're talking about the full FTA when it comes. Right now, what we have is what they call a low-hanging kind of a limited FTA. In the other one, I'll have to check whether their ask is for mutton as a whole. It is very unlikely that we'll agree if the department does not agree. So it's very unlikely.
We have a dozen poultry corporations under state governments. There are corporations in excess surplus egg production areas like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and all. And there are poultry corporations like UP, Bihar, Bengal, where they import the eggs. Why not the government corporations could be managed along with the central government and put a poultry board? This demand has been, I am saying, for the last 40 years. Why a deaf ear the government pays for separate poultry corporation? Once upon a time, there was Meat and Poultry Development Corporation in the central government, and we are not hearing about it. When you have interest in the seafood and the wealth under the seawater, why not on ground? You see the birds, you see the eggs, you see the chicken. Why don't you do it? What is preventing the government? Any political influences are there behind that?
I'll answer a bit, and then probably Mr. Sridhar would be able to answer in detail on this. You see, having these boards, and just now Mr. Singh spoke about it. As such, the government is not in favor of entering into new institutions, one, and two, business potential. That is something government is not very good at. So once we have these, and as you said, there are certain boards which are doing well and most of the others are not doing so well. The market economy or the internal trade itself is fairly robust, and intervention of the government in terms of forming a board, to my knowledge, doesn't make much of a sense in these times. I may be wrong, but this is the feeling that I have of my 3-4 months of experience over here. So would you like to elaborate a little on this?
Actually, I also don't really understand the rationale of demanding a board. You see, amongst all the subsectors of livestock and fishery sectors, poultry is one which is organized, which is formalized, and which has been consistently registering the most impressive growth. Poultry meat is growing at 22% these days. Is the highest growth of any food sector anywhere in the world, etc. Now, if you want to reverse this growth, probably we can think of a board.
Yeah, this is Vijay Ting from Intas as well as representing INFA. So the focus of the government has been on ease of doing business, but we have seen few laws being enacted by few states like Andhra Pradesh Feed Act, which causes a lot of issues and problems for the businessmen, the corporates. So I would like, there should not be another state coming up with another law, which makes the business difficult. So we would like some intervention from the government of India, in this regard.
What we can be talking about, see, this is a state subject. Let me start from there. It's a state subject. So a directive from here probably is something which cannot be done. And even if there is a directive, states are free to act or enact. That is where I begin with. However, even the state governments understand the prospects of business. So an advocacy with them is very important. What are the negatives of all of this? In fact, right now we are having the regional review meetings, and many of the secretaries, this is a department where either people know a lot or people are very disinterested. So when we were having this RRM yesterday, we were discussing about these things. And what comes out is the states want to protect their businesses, want to protect their farmers. And in that, I think I should not be using a negative term, but in that enthusiasm, the kind of fact that Andhra Pradesh has brought in has a negative ripple effect. But point well taken. I would request you to have a discussion with me on this. I would like to understand what it has created, what are the negative impacts that have been created. We can surely talk with the states, make that a discussion point, sensitize them a little bit more so that these follies don't happen. But the general enthusiasm of the governments to protect their constituents, I think, is playing up a little.
I am Ram Kuti from Coimbatore. The micronutrients we deal in poultry feed formulations. Most of I deal with this additives, feed additives for the poultry poultry feed. They are very, very critical. We in India, most of these micronutrients are very critical for the formulations. We totally depend on import, and mainly from China. And we have been having now and then this kind of problems, clearing and duty and things like that. And what the government should do, probably we should facilitate to make most of these items, vitamins, amino acids, most of these micronutrients, we should do it indigenously. Further, probably the government should address this technology. Because once China was totally dependent on import, now totally they are independent now. They make their own these micronutrients. Will you please help us to get this indigenously?
So what you're saying seems to be a research and development issue, really. About the trade itself, we do have restrictions when it comes to foreign direct investment from China. But as far as trade is concerned, and particularly trade in imports and intermediate products, there are no such restrictions that I'm aware of. R&D, of course, that is something that we can certainly look at. Both our state institutions as well as the private sector institutions should look at this gap and try to address it. I think that is something that the somebody like ICAR should have a look at it and find out how we can produce our indigenous inputs of this type. I remember there was a time when I was still in animal husbandry, I was surprised to know that even Amul was importing various cultures from for all of their curd and other products. And I think now they've started making their own. So it can be done, but it requires some R&D, and a push from both government and private will help.
And one more point, sir. We don't see the duty structure for the same items. Each country FTA, we have for some countries FTA, for some countries we don't have. From Europe, it is 30%. We import from, from Singapore or Malaysia or Korea or Taiwan, I mean, these places, the FTA again, the things for same item. So we are not kind of thing 10% difference that makes a lot of difference for importing from these countries. Why can't we have some uniform duty from whatever country we import?
Yeah, so I mean, I assume the particular product that you're talking about may be affected because there could be some bilateral trade agreements which are different from the general tariffs that apply to that particular HS code that you're talking about. We'll have to look at that. Where bilateral, I mean, you'll have to take a commercial call on whatever is making sense for you in terms of the landed cost after adding imports. Those are, I mean, as we expand our list of FTAs, which we intend to do, hopefully some of those issues will disappear.
And one more thing, that we see the chapters. We see some of the items on the 2-3 chapters. We get confused and get stuck in the customs. So that also has to be a little more, ambiguity, sir. There should be very clear chapter classification should come.
I think we are
I
out
think
of
we
time now.
already are past it. I'm very happy and thank you very much for such an enriching discussion. And I think this government's proactivity surprises me every time I interact. So thank you very much. Over to you, Sandeep.
Thank you. So the takeaway is clearly value, quality, productivity. Focus on domestic market while build exports. The moment you start building exports, your quality internally also starts improving. With these words, we thank Mr. Yadav, Srimati Alka Upadhyay, Shri Rajesh Kumar Singh and Shri Tarun Sridhar for their precious time. Thank you very much.